If you could only implement one thing from this entire video series, this will be the video. And this video is going to be going over one of the biggest meta concepts and also one of the biggest processes that impacted my journey and my life. And it's called the difference that makes the difference. This is something which I got inspired by one of my formative mentors and one of the best coaches and mentors in the UK. And therefore, I thank the world, a man called James Tripp. And this is his process, so all credit where credit's due. But I'm going to give my interpretations, my stories, my failures actually, so you can learn from them, so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did, which just cost years of life, years of stagnation, and years of just feeling like there is kind of change happening, but not actually being able to take that control and that power back from your own hands or into your own hands, and feeling like you're always a victim of your circumstance, and actually bringing that empowerment back and being like, I can actually change, and here's how I do it. So one of the things that makes this such a big process, which was so impactful, is it took me from being kind of like passive in my inner work journey, let's say that, and just in life in general, and being like, oh, if something happens, that's great. Like, let's say I have a really good session with my mentor. We had a really big breakthrough. That was something which I didn't have any control over. Either we had the breakthrough or we didn't. But with this process right here, even the smallest amount of change, you can extrapolate into something that's really, really impactful in life. When I was in the old company, which is some social stage that I worked with, the metaphor that I used all the time that really used to hit for clients was there's like a boulder in the road and there's a line in the boulder, like a crack. That crack is small, but over time, if you keep hitting it with your pickaxe, that crack is going to split the boulder open very cleanly. Now, the reason why I make that metaphor is because a lot of the time, the difference that we're experiencing, it is small, okay? Like maybe we do feel stuck. Maybe we do feel like we're in a plateau. Maybe we do feel like like nothing has really changed. But there is a small crack. And if we're just paying attention to the narrative that everything's the same and we're the same and we're destined to be like this and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying that about me because that's some of the storylines, as you're about to find out, that I'm about to get into. That when it came to that kind of stuff, you just ignore that crack. And you would start hitting the boulder. You wouldn't even try and break the boulder and move on your way down the path. But if you have this mindset, you can take a small crack like that, and in no time at all, you can bust through the obstacle. So the reason why I made this video is most people are not actually stuck, okay? They're just stuck because they focus on the same thing. Their RAS, their reticular activation system, in other words, that's just like where your awareness is placed, is on the same thing. So if your awareness is placed on the same thing all of the time, then of course you're going to feel like you're stuck. And this is why it breeds the idea that we're stagnating. We're in a plateau. We're not able to get out of this hole that we've dug ourselves into because we're paying attention to what's the same rather than what's different. And that's going to give you a clue about what the rest of the video is going to be about. And this, I'm going to say, is a fallacy. Okay, that's my I guess you could call it a contrarian take. It's kind of like if you watch a movie one time. I'm not sure if you've ever done this. The reason why this came up is because this is something that I've actually done before, where I watch a movie one time and I think I've got a pretty good memory. But if I've only watched it one time and it's been a few years until I watch it again, I can get the basic premise of it correct. Okay, like this event happens, this event happens, this event happens. But especially if it's something which has been a while and I've told it a few times, I will get obviously some words wrong. I'll also get certain emphases wrong. I will exaggerate something or I will undermine something. I will leave out something in order to tell the story better. And it's because every data set needs to be interpreted. The data is the same, it's the interpretation that changes, okay? So as we're about to get into, this doesn't mean that we're about to start lying to ourselves, okay? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it's important to say this now. Like in this movie example, I'm not lying. I'm not like saying, oh, this is what happened and something completely different happened. No, I think I'm being really sincere. I think I'm being really honest. I think I'm telling the truth. But in actuality, what's happening is over time, my own interpretation gets added. And because over time, I also forget the true source material, the narrative that I build is now slightly different and slightly different and slightly different and slightly different compared to the original narrative because my own interpretation gets added. Now, what this is a metaphor for is our life in general, okay? Oh, during our life, I can't speak today, apparently. In our life, right, we add our own interpretation to it. There is the data, there is the movie that happens, okay, that is our life. There is the narrative. But then there is the narrator. And the narrator, more often than not, if we feel like we're stuck, if we feel like we're stagnating, if we feel like there's something that isn't quite working in our life, that can be honest, okay? This is where the nuance comes in. There's a lot of nuance in this video. That can be real, but the interpretation, instead of remembering the actual data, we just remember the last time that we remembered it. And then the last time we remembered that, the last time we told that story to ourselves. Everything that's going on in our mind is a story that we're telling ourselves. So if the story that we're telling ourselves is that nothing changes and it's all the same, then the next time we tell that story, we are going to remember that everything's remaining the same and nothing's going to change. And then that becomes the narrative rather than the actual data that happened, rather than the actual movie that happened. And it's only when we watch the movie again and we pay attention to it that we realize how much of our own interpretation has been added. Okay? It's a kind of like waking back up to reality. Essentially, what we're doing is removing a big blind spot, is what we're doing with this process. Okay? Now, story time of one of my eventful failures, I guess you could say. And I'm going to keep on looking back at the notes that I have here because I want to make sure that I really get this right, okay? This is one of the biggest failures that stagnated me for like a couple of years, I would say, for a long time. And it was around the issue of feeling like I was worthy of love or being attractive, right? And also that in the form of not friendships, but like because I had a close group of friends which I knew had my back, but it was more like just normal cold situations or warm situations. Like you go to a party, that kind of there's some people that you know and there's some people that you don't. It's also being accepted by them as well. So I had all these storylines. Like I was naturally anxious. Let me say that again. Like I was naturally anxious. Like I didn't know what I was doing, and people just wouldn't like me. Okay, and this worldview, this colorful worldview, let's say, do you think that was a good or a bad thing for me to have, right, when it came to all of this stuff? It wasn't, right? But I was under the guise that this is just the movie, this is just the facts, this is just the data, right? Another fun thing that you can play around with is you can say, whenever you're just saying like this is just the facts and this is just the data, you can just ask yourself, when is the last time I actually looked at the facts and the data without that narration? This worldview didn't allow me to collect new data. This is the trouble, and this is why this is the fourth part of the inner work series, okay? Because it's so important. Once we implement this process that I'm about to get into, all of this stuff you're going to avoid, and it's going to save you years, okay? And even when I went on dates and friends wanted to hang out with me and groups would invite me out and clients were asking after me and saying that they really liked my work that we did together, because of this narration, because I kept on telling the movie over and over again, or my interpretation of the movie rather than the movie itself, this data couldn't get through to me. So what happened is the data where it did support the fact that maybe I wasn't liked, like there's one funny story here, which I literally put funny story. Everyone got invited, everyone in my like close friend group, we were all kind of living together because we were building the business and social stage. This was in Budapest, by the way. And we were looking after our mentor, Sister Kema, and all this kind of crazy stuff was happening. Everyone got invited to my best friend's girlfriend's party, apart from me, right? Now, this was like a one kind of off event that was extreme, but because of this interpretation, because I didn't know or I didn't implement what this video is about, I just took that as the worldview and it reinforced it even more, which reinforced the idea of stagnation even more. And it was only by adopting the difference that makes the difference process and applied it in a meta view to my life, like a big picture bird's eye view of my life, for an extended period of time, that's very important, plus deep shadow work, because the reason why this playlist is start second, not start first, is because this process is extremely transformational. But as you're probably picking up to right now, if my core constructs or narratives or beliefs about the world hadn't changed, like where did I get this belief that I wasn't attractive? or that I couldn't hang out with people, or that I was naturally a little bit disagreeable and I was always going to be more polarizing than maybe my other friends, maybe like Cameron, right, who you've seen on the podcast, then I could get some benefit from this, quite a lot probably, because, you know, as you mature, you just naturally mature, blind spots go away if you're on the right path. But if those constructs never changed, if I didn't have the right technology to change those constructs, like introjections, split ego states, projections, holding an unconditional loving presence or witness for myself or relationship for myself, then these issues wouldn't fundamentally change. So if that's more of your issue, then go and look at the starting playlist. It's called Advanced Shadow Work All Levels, okay? But if you adopt this on top of all of that, and on top of the videos, the hypnotic loop, and the head, heart, and gut process that's in this playlist, then this will take your results like literally 10x them, okay? Because this is what enabled me to not just break those constructs, but make sure they stayed broken and so that I don't have these issues anymore. Like they literally don't arise for me anymore, okay? Another example of this is a client that I'm working with, that I'm still currently working with, and we'll call her Andrea, that's not her name. And she was like really stuck and like really in a bit of a tough place mentally before we worked together, and emotionally. She would scroll so much that until her head hurt or until she just had to go to sleep. So the whole day she had struggling with issues like low self-esteem and low self-worth, which also coincided with having high, high, well, moments, I can't speak again, moments of high self-esteem as well. So it's like this crazy up and down, which is actually in some ways a little bit worse, you could say. And she kept on feeling isolated and like people didn't care about her. All of this was despite being a successful founder slash influencer in the travel niche, okay? So she was like very successful, but she just had these crazy ups and downs, right? But by implementing this idea, because what the big thing that I worked out after a couple of sessions is she kept on saying the same narrative that she was just the same and nothing changed and nothing will change, okay? Which is the whole topic of this video. And by implementing this, and by the way, just so we're transparent, she's still working with this, it's still going deeper. Decades of perceived stagnation and feeling like she's just the same, and also having a subconscious narrative that she always gave up on herself, because again, that was a narrative that just came up and it never got questioned. So we're focusing on the same. So what that means is, because I feel like I'm not explaining myself the best here, that narrative came up spontaneously, and because that narrative never got reevaluated and never got questioned again, it got pulled into the sameness and the stuckness. But because it was built on that, when we were able to implement this difference that makes the difference, what happened is she actually realized that she came back all of the time, that she did always eventually come back for herself, because she was able to pay attention to what was actually changing in her life rather than what was the same. Now, this was also due to the change that we were able to create together on sessions together too. So we're able to lock that in together. But it happened both times. It was in the session, but also questioning her entire narrative on how she viewed her life, okay? Now, it's really important, and I made these disclaimers a little bit earlier, that we are not deluding ourselves. We're not doing toxic positivity. We're not trying to pretend that things are what they're not. We're taking the data. We are just being more honest about how we are interpreting that data. And we're constantly reevaluating it. At no point are we ever just taking something as the gospel truth. Instead, what we are doing is making sure that we are actually looking at the reality. And what I put here, which is actually really well written, so pat on the back, we are exposing our own blind spots and allowing them to naturally fall away, okay? So what is the process? I've already said it's about paying attention to the difference and seeing what difference that makes to us. But this is the actual, like, wording of the original question, which was supposed to be done in a coaching context. And I'll flash this up on the screen. If you guys want the cheat sheet, then just let me know in the comments and I will put it in the comments, okay? And it comes from the questions, what is different? How does noticing this difference make a difference to me? How will this difference that I'm feeling right now, even if it's just the smallest percentage, make a difference to me in X triggering event? And how does knowing this difference make a difference to me, right? So there's a lot of difference there. Essentially, the first question, what it's doing, is we are noticing and paying attention to what is the difference. So there's two ways that you can implement this, which I talked about, which is after doing an inner work, shadow work session on yourself. So you have the head, heart, and gut process, you have introjections, split ego states, projections. Also, you have my free 3 hour live stream, which is a shadow work program that I have, which is free. All it's going to cost is your email. It's done with my paid one-on-one clients. It's got a ton of value. If you're interested in all of this kind of stuff, then please, I can't recommend it enough. It will change how you approach inner work, so go ahead and download that. You can do it after a session, or you can do it just as a 24/7 intention live practice. We'll get into that in a bit. But after a session, let's say like you've just worked with an introjection, you've done a head, heart, and gut process. So we'll do the head, heart, and gut process because that's the video which is before this in the playlist. You say, okay, I've just done a head, heart, and gut process. What is the difference that I'm feeling right now? Oh, the difference that I'm feeling right now is I feel much lighter and much more clarity. Great. And how does this make a difference to me? So the reason why we asked that the second time is because we have the difference. We're establishing the base, right? This is the difference. Cool. Now we're extrapolating that. Remember that metaphor of the boulder, which is chipping away. And what difference does that make to me? Well, the difference it makes to me is it makes me realize that I am actually in agency and control of my own life. And the third question, we don't have to ask that yet. You can keep on asking yourself, and what difference does this make to me, as much as you can. I encourage you to do that actually, because as you do this process, each layer is a deeper level of your unconscious working. Because at the start will be kind of conscious things that are on your conscious awareness and perception. But as you get deeper, it forces you to get deeper and deeper and deeper into what actually this means, what the difference is. Because it started off with clarity, now it's moving to agency and empowerment. If I ask myself that again, what difference does this make to me? It makes me remember how much resources and how resourceful and how powerful I actually am. So it's getting to a deeper level, like real personality rewiring, a personality change, which is like, wow, I used to think that I was weak and just kind of tepid and I was a leaf in the wind, but now I'm realizing I'm actually an extremely powerful person, right? And you keep on asking that, yeah? And then you get to the third part of this, which is, how will this difference that I'm feeling or experiencing right now, I think experiencing is a little bit better. Because remember, words are, in the grand scheme of things, meaningless, but they're a vehicle to get us to talk about our consciousness, so they are meaningful in that way. So I think experience is better. We ask ourselves, okay, even if I was just feeling the smallest amount of this that I'm experiencing right now, how would this make a difference to me in a triggering event? And the triggering event is the events that you came to the shadow work session or the inner work session, or you're just working through on yourself to begin with, right? The reason you're doing this. And that could be, oh, like when I'm around my family and they're always pushing on my boundaries, right? I'm getting that from a client actually. You say, well, even if I was just feeling the smallest amount of this, the reason we say the smallest is because we want to not have a crazy expectation that we're going to feel totally different, because that's not always going to be the case. Well, even if I just had the idea of this, it would make me much less reactive and make me not reliant, my emotional state not reliant on how my parents treat me. Wow, that's like a massive breakthrough. And then we go straight back to the fourth part, which is, and how does knowing this make a difference to me? The reason why the third question is so important is because it acts as a stress tester. It's called future pacing in the coaching industry. And future pacing is when you project the future. And remember that when our mind creates future events, it's quite difficult for it to tell the real difference between like a memory and a future event. So if we have this experience that, oh, we've already played out a future event, it makes us much more robust. It makes us much more anti-fragile because we've already experienced that in our mind. So when it comes up again, it won't be so raw, right? It won't be so like triggering. We'll be like, oh no, wait, I was here. And it makes it easier to snap in, and it makes it easier to take an inner work practice and the difference we're feeling with that into an actual, real, practical, tangible, outward practice. And then to make that tangible, practical, real difference even deeper, you just go through the same thing. And how does this make a difference to me? And you keep on asking that until you've exhausted everything. If you do this, this will take any breakthrough. Let's say you have a breakthrough that's like a 6 out of 10 breakthrough. It will take this at least up to a strong 8. Right? I don't want to overpromise it, but for me, that's the event. That's what happened, and I use this on every single mentorship coaching call that I have with clients, because it takes them from being kind of a lukewarm breakthrough to really having a robust difference in their life where they're not worried about if they're going to lose this progress. And just some more kind of notes on language. You want to use this difference rather than that difference. This is like an associative language. So it brings this difference closer in association to you. Whereas if you say that, then it pushes that association away. It's a bit more disassociative, just something small, right? So you implement this after every single shadow work and inner work session that you do on yourself. And then how you can bring this principle, this is actually what we did with Andrea, is we just have this as a subtle intention on our mind all the time. So we just check in with it, remember, difference over the same. And every single event that happens with us, we just color it through this lens. You can ask yourself these questions too. You won't always have the time, but you say, what is the difference that I'm noticing here? And what you'll find is you're not lying to yourself. You'll actually find that you are acting different to how you were last time you were with your parents, right? But if you don't have this there, then you'll just fall back into the sameness, the same stuckness narratives. That's it from me. I'm so glad you're on this journey. I'm super honored that you're here watching this playlist. If you want to subscribe, go ahead and subscribe. Again, I'll be so honored if this is your introduction or this is the path that you want to take. And I'll see you on the next one.